Before there was Porgy and Bess, the whole idea of whether there could be a real American opera was an open question in our, great history. And opera had changed a lot in the late 19th and early 20th century. By the way, I'm vamping until they get the panel set up. In the 18th century opera, stories were told about gods and goddesses, and then the nobility and people of distinguished, tragic heroes and that kind of thing. And then with the Verismo movement in opera in the late 19th and early 20th century, composers and audiences became much more interested in what could this art form express about the nobility of people in everyday life. And that's what George Gershwin was so interested in. And I've got to say, this production we had scheduled for the spring of 2020. And you may recall that we weren't able to do any of our productions back then. Haven't we been through a lot since that time? But I'll tell you, we at Washington National Opera, Francesca Zembello is our artistic director, and is really one of the thought leaders in the opera world. And when the murder of George Floyd occurred, and there was so much important discussion about issues of racism in this country that had been not well enough acknowledged, we really thought about the question of, well, is it right to produce Porgy and Bess? Porgy and Bess is not how we would produce an opera nowadays, because it's a story about Black Americans written by white Americans, and we thought, is that actually the right thing to do? And so we went on quite a long listening tour on this question, and we got overwhelming, unanimous answers that yes, Porgy and Bess belongs to all of us in America, and really over the decades, it has been interpreted and reinterpreted and really developed into kind of a collective ownership. And that's because of the extraordinary truth-telling about these characters through the medium of music. So you'll hear a lot more about that now, because I think we're ready for our panel. And so I'm going to introduce to you the moderator of the panel, and she'll introduce everybody else. But we're very grateful to her. She is a professor at Howard University's Chadwin Boseman School for the Fine Arts. She holds degrees in opera performance from Oberlin College and UMD. She's not only a distinguished scholar and lecturer, but she's herself a very accomplished soprano, very active as a performer in the DC area and beyond. And if you're good, she might sing as well as talk. Okay, so will you join me in welcoming Angela Powell Walker? I'm giving you this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully tonight you guys are going to leave here with a wealth of information that you never knew before you walked into the door about this phenomenal opera, Porgy and Bess. But not only are you going to learn a little bit about Porgy and Bess, you're going to learn about the history of it, how it came about, why someone thought they could actually write this American opera. You're going to learn about the themes of the opera and what they represent in today's society as opposed to what it represented back before when it was first written. You're going to learn about the opportunities that it gave to African American singers and their love and sometimes hate relationship with the opera. And you're going to also learn about the specific things that happen with individual singers that will be out on the stage with us tonight and their journey with Porgy and Bess. So there's going to be a lot that we cover, right? Yeah. So we'll make sure we do that. Yeah, let's get out a round of applause. So I've been tasked with introducing our panelists. So first, let's have them come on out on the stage, and we're going to bring our singers back. Oh, I think we can clap a little louder. Weren't they phenomenal? So first up, I'd like to introduce you to Miss Allison Cambridge. Obviously, she is a baritone. But she hails from right here in Washington, D.C. Woo! And just in case you're from Arlington, Virginia, of course, she's actually from Arlington, Virginia. But, you know, we all say we're from D.C., so that's great. I'm on the Maryland side, but I'm from D.C. as well. Anyway, we have had the pleasure of hearing Miss Allison sing the role of Clara in the 2005 production of Porgy and Bess with Washington National Opera. Corresponded with Katrina when that happened. We heard her sing the role of Clara in 2010 with Washington National Opera. That was with Obama's election. And of course, you heard COVID sort of ixnayed 2020, so we won't talk about that. But in 2025, Miss Allison is back to debut the role of Bess in Porgy and Bess. She has been seen in various roles in various opera companies. Some of her favorite have been Carmen and Tosca. And of course, she's played Julia in Showboat. So you can see her versatility. She's been Mimi and she's been Musetta in La Boheme. So quite versatile and quite wonderful. Can we give her another round of applause? And another side note, today in the audience, she has her brother and sister-in-law and her two nieces, Kaya and Zoe. Yeah. And I hear Zoe is quite the singer herself, following in her auntie's footsteps. And it makes us very, very happy to know that 90 years from now, we'll still be doing Porgy and Bess, and we'll have all these wonderful young artists coming along. So. Next up, we have our phenomenal soprano, Reginald Smith Jr. Reginald, who would like to be called Reggie, so as we're coming up for questions, say, hey, Reggie, and you can tell him any question you want. He hails from the wonderful Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah. And he, too, is debuting his role as Porgy and Bess with Washington National Opera. And this has sort of been a full circle moment for him that I found out, because his first professional operatic singing experience debut was in a role in Porgy and Bess as Lawyer Frazier. So it's full circle. He went from lawyer to Porgy. So two more things. One, I've already told you we're going to call him Reggie. And the other thing I found out is Reggie likes to cook. Yeah. So can you imagine someone in the kitchen going, oh, ow, that burned. So, and I'm going to pull my cell phone out really quick because we have one more panelist that I'd like to welcome to the stage. Come on up, Ray. Just dropped stuff all over the place. Yeah, let's give him a round of applause. So Raymond White is the senior music specialist in the library's music division here. He holds undergraduate degrees in history and music and graduate degrees in musicology and library science. He took a different path than we vocalists in school, but you know, it was a great path. During his nearly 3 decades in the music division, he has worked in a variety of capacities involving acquisitions, reference assistance, preservation and exhibitions and displays. He now serves as the Division Outreach Coordinator. His varied musical interests include George and Ira Gershwin. He is the curator of the library's Gershwin collection, and as well as George Frederick Handel, Franz Liszt, operas, and choral music. So let's please welcome Mr. Ray again. So not to bore anyone, so I'm going to be quiet and let the real expert do all the conversations. And we'd like to do this more of a conversational style. And Ray and I were talking about the origins of this wonderful opera, Porgy and Bess. Of course, all of you know it was written by George Gershwin, but there was a book that was before the opera came about. And that book was written by
DuBose Heyward.
Yes, DuBose Heyward. And DuBose Heyward, as I know, he came from the southern region of the Sea Island. Yeah.
Charleston, South Carolina, he was from. And he started out his career wanting to be an insurance salesman, but kind of went to Plan B and set out to write. And his first novel was, in fact, Porgy. It was published in 1925. It achieved some success. George Gershwin got a hold of it, was given the book as a gift. And he read it and he thought, you know, there's dramatic potential here. And so he reached out to Hayward and asked about whether we could strike a deal. Well, it turned out that Hayward was interested in it, and they began to talk a little bit. And then the word leaked out in the Hayward household that he was considering this thing. And Hayward's wife, who was a budding playwright, confessed that on the sly, she was turning it into a play. And she wanted to know if they could wait a little bit with the opera to see where the play might go. Well, Dubose was intrigued by this idea, so he joined her enterprise. They produced a play that was produced on Broadway in 1927, and it was called Porgy, and it was a big success.
Okay.
Well,
Fascinating. It was a big success. Question, in comparison to when the opera debuted, would you say the success was better for the play or for when it debuted in New York on Broadway?
Well, it depends on how you count success. The play ran for 55 weeks on Broadway. This was not a little overnight come here, go there thing. And then it did a national tour. And then it came back for a revival. So it was seen in 2 Broadway runs in the 1920s. It definitely enjoyed success.
Excellent. As opposed to maybe the opera?
Well, now, you bring up an interesting question. People speak about Porgy and Bess as having been a failure in its original production. And I take exception to that. The failure was in that it didn't recoup its financial investment. The investment of $70,000 to produce this thing was not recouped, so it was a financial failure, but it ran for 124 performances in New York before making a tour of 4 or 5 American cities. I would ask you, opera fans here, name some famous opera that enjoyed 124 performances in its initial run. You can't.
No, I cannot.
You can't.
Okay, so commercial success, yes. What about within society at the time?
I think from the beginning, there have been sort of differing views about the opera. Tunes caught on very quickly. George Gershwin, you may know, died at the tragically young age of 38 in 1937, which was only 2 years after the opening of this opera. And in memorial concerts, selections from the opera were sung. And as with a lot of popular shows, tunes have been taken up, recorded by artists of all sorts and kinds. And so there's been, over the last 90 years, kind of a parallel life of this music. The productions of the opera, it didn't make its way to the Metropolitan Opera until it was 50 years old.
50 years old, ladies and gentlemen, 50.
It made its way to the Washington Opera, and it made its way to Europe. It's made its way to a lot of places, but it also made its way to jazz. And let's talk about Billie Holiday's performance of, Summertime.
Yeah.
And let's talk about Miles Davis.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of the selections from the opera are found in the American Songbook now, that people do it as jazz. Sometimes they're more spiritual type of things because, of course, the opera's music is based in that culture of music, right? And one of the things I was gently stabbing at with how it was accepted by the community, not only commercially, the dollar-wise, but the community of African American people. And I'm going to bring our artist in on this conversation a little bit because just to give a little back history, most of this, the book, and then, of course, the opera is based off of a culture called the Gullah culture or the Geechee culture. And they're known for their call and response, you know. So if I say, Lordy, then you respond back. Lordy.
Lordy,
Shoodlum, shoodlum.
shoodlum, shoodlum.
All right, y'all got it. Nice call and response. I love it. And of course, in the opera, we have Sport and Life that has his why do, that whole section. So you have that rhythmic structure, the syncopations, all of that rich musical expressiveness that comes out of that Gullah culture that I think Hayward tried to put in his book. But then Gershwin in 1934 actually visited the Gullah Island or Gullah community and got to hear and immerse himself in that culture a little bit. And so knowing where it comes from. So this Gullah community is a West African descendants of enslaved persons. Their language has its own rhythm. It has, it's a Creole American language. It's unique to that culture. It goes up and down the coast a little bit. So it was imperative that someone like Gershwin did his homework to see this culture, right? And no matter what Hayward or Gershwin could do, it's always going to be viewed through the lens of the white eye, right? But this was really amazing back then because they did everything in their power to be as respectful to the spirit of the community that they just got to visit and learn about, and to be as authentic to it as they possibly could, which is a wonderful thing. But at the same time, you have the people that said, wait a minute, here's this opera, this white man has written it. How is this respectful? This isn't our community, la, 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 la. We had that uproar of that. How did that affect, one, the opera as it was going forth in life? And then if you guys could chime in and tell us how that affects you as African American singers.
Please.
Well, so my first experience with Porgy and Bess was actually seeing it as a teenager on vacation with my family. I think we were somewhere in California, and we went to see like a local production. And of course, I knew all of the songs. I'd heard them before on the radio, of course, by different jazz musicians and pop musicians, lots of different covers. And then growing up and studying opera and voice in school, actually my senior recital in high school, I sang excerpts from Porgy and Bess, and on the stage at Sidwell Friends School. and I wrote my senior paper about the history of Porgy and Bess, and I was so fascinated with it. And as you say, yes, it is an opera about a black community in Charleston, it's loosely based off of what was called Cabbage Row, which in the opera is called Catfish Row. It's been renamed, and Porgy is based off of a real person, Goat Cart Sam, and so Du Bois in writing the book, and then with the play and with Gershwin. He really took from real people in the community. And then when I made my Washington National Opera debut in 2005 in the role of Clara, is when I really started to continue to dig in and being a part of the show as an actor and putting yourself in the place of and being part of this community. For those of you who've never been part of an opera, when you start a rehearsal process and you're rehearsing with your cast for a month, sometimes two. Actually, it was 2 months back in 2005 because it was such a massive production, and it was the premiere here. That became our Catfish Row, our Cabbage Row, your cast. You're with them every day, in and out, and you go through the ups and the downs, and you do become a community. So I think being a part of the show in the rehearsal process, we build a sense of family and community. With respect to some of the sort of criticisms that Porgy and Bess has had over the years is, does this play into stereotypes, right? You know, it's a story of a cripple, of a beggar, of a woman who's a prostitute. It's insinuated, you know, who has a drug addiction problem. You've got the guy who's really violent. Then you have your Mamie characters, right? You've got Serena, and some of the other women in the community. Sport and Life, who's the drug dealer. What I would say, and so a lot of people say this is a negative stereotype about, you know, Black communities. I would venture to guess that everybody in this room probably knows somebody at somewhere in their family or a friend of who's been touched by or has somebody that has been affected by addiction, by, you know, some sort of a physical ailment.
She's coming to the themes of the show. Themes of the show.
Love, the loss of love, the struggles within a community, sisterhood, brotherhood. All of these things are explored in Porgy and Bess, and I think that they affect not just this Catfish Row, this Charleston community, but all communities of all races, creeds, colors, and to this day. So I think it's important to look at the big themes that are addressed in Porgy and Bess and look at it through that personal lens and how can you relate to it. And then, of course, you have the amazing music of Gershwin, which you just want to hum and sing along to the entire time, which makes it the icing on the cake. So,
Yeah, Reggie?
Well, it's hard to add anything scholarly to. They teach y'all different in D.C. I'm only joking, of course. I'm only joking. You know. Oh, I'm professional. So, Porgy and Bess is a really special piece for me. Much like Allison, I was singing Plenty of Nothing and Bessie Was My Woman Now. In high school, before even seeing the show, I knew all of the tunes. And one of my favorite video recordings is still Nina Simone singing I Loves You, Porgy. You know, like, it's just so deeply moving and emotional. And so there's so much power and strength in this music. And going to university and being in different opera summer programs and doing my first professional opera was Porgy and Bess at Cincinnati Opera, walking into a room and seeing a bunch of African-American opera singers was huge. That's, 40 plus people that look like you doing the same thing. You don't get that all the time when you do Marriage of Figaro, as lovely as it is, And so that immediately was a sort of energy and connection that you can't really explain, that everyone's there for this great purpose, and there's sort of this immediacy of community that you feel. Also for me, growing up in Georgia, in Atlanta, I have family in South Georgia, but also some that are along the coast, so I'm very familiar with the Gullah Geechee sounds, like, oh Lord, yeah, me done what you told me to do. Me done what you told me to do. I said, me done what you told, like that. I've done what you have told me to do. But the dialect is very familiar to me because I grew up hearing it, same in South Georgia. Boy, you better go around there now. Boy, you better go around there now, for those who did not understand what I was saying. So, so immediately hearing the language of the opera struck a personal note for me, because I thought, wow, this is so familiar. And especially knowing that Gershwin and Hayward spent time really examining, learning, being in the community to put that element into the opera, like, oh, there's somebody knocking at your door. The spiritual is in the opera. And so it gives a sort of immediacy and a cultural aspect that that you don't get in a lot of other shows. Now, to the aspects of stereotyping, I actually was here on this stage when we did Castor and Patience by Greg Spears and Tracy K. Smith that talked about this family during the economic downturn where in the same area in the Carolinas, they have all of this family land, but Castor has his family in Rochester, and they're facing bankruptcy. And he's saying, we should sell some of this land so I can make a living. And she says, we're not selling this land. This is our family's history. And there's this constant battle. And so, as I said then, I say about this show, it is very much a human story told through a Black lens. And in a sense that it doesn't matter if it were, African American story or an Asian American, whatever. The point that Porgy loves Bess so much, he has so much love for her that he kills a man. This person who has a serious deformity in his body finds the strength to say, I love you so much, and I want you to be away from this person so much that I will kill a man for you. And still experiences such loss. And I think that's a human story of that extreme love and the community that rallies around when Clara leaves. If you haven't seen the story, spoiler alert, Clara leaves to go chase after her husband during a hurricane, and she gives her baby to Bess. And Bess now becomes this child's mother. And the whole community rallies around and says, we're going to give this child a Christian raising, even when Bess leaves. That sort of community of how we all look after each other, how we support each other, can be found in a lot of different aspects. It just so happens that this one is told through a Gullah Geechee Black aspect. But I think if we look past the micro and start to see more of the macro, you'll really appreciate the depth of the story. So that's what I have for that.
Thank you. So that question sort of took on its own life, which I loved about it. That's wonderful. I will say that giving a perspective as a singer myself with the show, I've been able to sing every role. And when I first started, well, I guess we all start with Clara, and then I moved on to Serena, and then got to sing Bess. But I would say, I'm going to bring up a little slightly different topic. When I first came to Porgy and Bess, of course, I knew all the songs, and I was like, hey, these are great songs. But then when I would go audition for opera companies, I would get cast in Porgy and Bess, but I was never cast as Liu in Turandot, which is a role I sing. I sing the Countess in Marriage of Figaro, but I got cast in Porgy and Bess. I sing Mimi and Musetta in La Boheme, and I got cast in Porgy and Bess. And so that was sort of my experience moving through this opera. So if you two could tell us a little bit more. I will say, as I have grown to understand and do my homework and learn about the opera and learn where it came from and learn, and I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world, I love it. But it didn't start that way. So, and I know a lot of African American singers don't. And then you can get a little jaded because of that. Well, here, you can sing Porgy and Bess. So talk to us about that.
Well, it's very interesting because early on, I've always had to fight doing too much too soon, too big too soon. They hear this voice and they hear, oh, it's such big, rah, 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 and they want to throw you into these huge roles with these big orchestras where you're screaming for 3 hours and you're 19. You know, it's like crazy. It sounds silly, but then you hear and you're like, why would they do that? So one of the roles that I was offered early on in my life and my career was Porgy at 25. And again, by this point, I had already done Lawyer Frazier. I'd performed Jake, I think, 2 or 3 times by this point. So I was very familiar with the music and with the characters, and I knew the amount of work that it would take to do the role. And I told my manager at the time that I love the opera. I want to do Porgy, but I want to do it when it's a part of my repertoire and not all of my repertoire. I don't want to get stuck doing one thing. I don't want people to say, here's Reggie Smith, he sings Porgy. So I was offered a lot of money for a 25-year-old kid.
$20.
No, it was like 12 productions singing top fee at 25.
Okay.
And I was singing, third man from the left at the time. So I was like, wow, so much money. But then I thought, what is this going to do to my voice, first off? And then what is it going to do to the longevity of my career and the type of career that I want to have? And so I avoided, and I kept singing Third Tree from the Left in Memphis and Birmingham and growing the repertoire so that now people say, oh, Reggie Smith sings Tonio, he sings Scarpia, he sings Alfio, he sings Gemont, he's seen him do Sharpless, and he's now doing Porgy. And, so even next season, this is my first time doing Porgy, but I don't have any Porgy coming up for like the next year or two. And that's intentional. It's the same way with Scarpia in Tosca. I love singing the role, but it's a pull on the voice if you do it well. And so I had 2 this year, and I told my manager, if they offer it, I'm not taking any next year, so I can do things that are a little easier on the voice and on the body, and then I'll come back to it. So, but to answer your question about the Porgy aspect, I have a very dear friend of mine that did Porgy for the first time, and after opening night was offered 4 different productions of Porgy. After singing for 20 years, had never been offered, those things before. So nowadays, I think you have a bit more control, but it's still something that you have to be mindful of.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience, although it was sort of the reverse. I was told not to do it, and I was warned because I was so young when I debuted here in the role of Clara. I was just so excited to be a part of the show, and my manager told me, period, point blank, Allison, you will sing Clara, and it will only be in order to make your debut with some major houses. You are about to get offered Bess all the time. You look the part, X, Y, Z. And he was like, you're 23, you should not be singing it. And I was like, I just listened to him because I was so green. And that's exactly what happened. I sang Clara in like 5 major houses over the course of 4 or 5 years. And I never sang another Porgy again until 2016 when I was ready to debut as Bess at the Spoleto Festival in Charleston.
Fabulous.
But at that time though, I had about a 15-year or 10, 15-year career that was rooted in Mimi, Musetta, Countess, to all the traditional repertoire. So it's unfortunate, but it is a thing. You do have to have, I think, good management or just a good head on your shoulder to know that it's important as Black singers to establish yourself in other repertoire and be known for that, so that when the time does come for you to choose to do a Porgy, to choose to do a Bess, it is your choice, and you know that all the other offers for all the other things are going to continue to come in. But it's a very strategic thing.
And it's hard to turn down the money. I mean, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
That's a real part of what we do.
And I'm glad you said that because I've actually spoken to several singers from the opera that will tell you the opposite. They love the fact that they've had Porgy and Bess as their career. So they do tours, and the only thing they've ever sung is they've moved up from chorus to different smaller roles to larger roles in Porgy and Bess, and it has been their career for 20 years, being paid quite well, paying their mortgage, raising their kids, singing Porgy and Bess. Now, they're rarely home because they're traveling all over the world, but it is an opportunity that some people love and relish. And so
Yeah, I would
it just
just
depends
say-
on your perspective.
Yeah, I would just say again, it depends on the person. It depends on the type of career that you want and that you're okay with. Just to put in perspective, not necessarily about Porgy, but I went to university with a fantastic tenor who had audition anxiety. He could sing a role on stage, he could sing in studio class, he would get into an audition and just the nerves would get the best of him. And the idea of having to do so many auditions and travel around, he hated it. So he found out that there was a position at Lyric Opera of Chicago in the chorus, and he said, okay, I'm gonna do my one really good audition, and he's been there ever since. And he loves the fact that he can be in the chorus, he can be in one place, but that's the career that he wanted and that he chose. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with
Nothing at all.
doing a lot of Porgy, but again, it really depends on you and what you want.
Right. And the really amazing thing about Porgy and Bess is that it's been around for 90 years and we can have this conversation, and we know it'll probably be around for 90 plus more years because of the themes and the legacy that goes along with this opera. You know, we had you were talking about some of the themes of the show and the struggles and the community and what the community deals with. But this opera deals with the struggles with addiction. It deals with poverty and social inequality, domestic violence and toxic relationships, mental health, wanting to belong to something. But the thing that's the best about this opera is that its most important theme is that it's about hope, and it's about love, and it's about resilience, and it's about being a part of something that's bigger than you. And those are the themes that we can take from the past when you had operas like we're talking about. Oh my goodness, it's Porgy and Bess. Well, back when they made this opera, white performers put on blackface to do shows. Now we have shows where we can be up on the stage. And we have the history of all of that. And because of these themes that they brought into this opera, it translates to today when you have your police violence and you have your gentrification and tons of domestic abuse. And how do you survive all of that? Well, Porgy certainly did. Oh, Lord, I'm on my way. And that, my friends, I think is why this opera has been around for 90 years, and it's going to be around for 90 plus more. Yeah. So, Mr. Ray, in the library here, you have this wonderful collection of all the things that are, Porgy and Bess. So can you just give us an example of some of the things that we can go and, touch and learn more about this opera?
Absolutely. Because we have a nearly comprehensive record of the work of George and Ira Gershwin, it happens that within that is the comprehensive record of this opera. It starts with DuBose Hayward's typescript libretto. It's 81 pages long. DuBose Hayward sent this from South Carolina to New York in installments beginning in 1933, a scene at a time, sent it up to George in typescript. George worked from the typescript, made notes on the typescript. We have that document here, and 2 pages of it are on display in the lobby now.
Did you work with Ira as well, with the libretto?
Initially, DuBose did the libretto and brought in Ira for additional lyrics. And so the Ira lyrics are "I Got Plenty of Nothing," and the up-tempo type numbers. The very first page of this typescript libretto has the 8 lines of Summertime that George set almost word for word the way DuBose wrote them. And the lyrical ballad kind of pieces are almost entirely DuBose. And the the wordier pieces are Ira. But the other thing that's unusual about this opera, as far as George Gershwin is concerned, is his compositional approach. By the time he embarked upon this, he'd been a Broadway and Hollywood composer for 15 years, let's say, and by his own admission, he did what he called composing at the piano. And he would sit and play and noodle around, and he didn't do a lot of composing on paper. He made some sketches, but really not very many. And once he decided how the song was going to go, then he wrote out a kind of an abbreviated piano vocal score, and that was that. In the case of Porgy and Bess, we have more than 100 pages of sketches, and there are 3 examples of those up in the lobby also. Before he ever got to really reasoning out where the sketch was going to go. So it was an approach to composition that he never had used before, and it sort of goes to the point that George is quoted as having said, "This work was more important to me than any other music I ever wrote." And it makes sense with that because he spent longer on it than any other music he ever wrote. He spent more than 20 months writing these melodies, writing these harmonies, writing these songs, and composing the complete orchestration for the opera. 2 volumes of the orchestration are in the lobby as well. The orchestration itself was 480 pages, handwritten himself. I mean, you look at this score and you think...
So no finale or in none of those programs?
Apparently not. But the one other thing that's worth saying is it's all fine that we have this, and it's all fine that we can see this, but at the bottom, the Library of Congress is operating a research library. And the reason we have these materials is so that people can come to the Performing Arts Reading Room, describe the project they're trying to undertake, talk to our reference librarians, and get put in touch with this material. We serve it in our reading room on a regular basis. Thank you.
Important work.
And I would also add that we do a balancing act between preservation and access. These Gershwin manuscripts are stored in a climate-controlled vault area because they are important. We want to preserve them. Yet, if we kept them in the vault all the time, we never brought them out for anybody, preservation would be enhanced, but to what end? So the Performing Arts Reading Room in the Madison Building, it's open from 8:30 to 5, Monday through Saturday, and if you want to undertake a study of this work or any of thousands of other pieces, this is why we are here. Come to see us.
That's phenomenal. I know I've learned a lot. I'll be here reading some of those books so I can give a test to some of my kids at school.
Send them over.
They're probably very upset that I'm learning from you right now.
We do research orientations,
all right. Well,
too.
I'll bring them with me. I'll bring them with me. Okay, so thank you for that. And I think it's wonderful to have the preservation of all of these phenomenal works of art, but especially Porgy and Bess because it's so important to, I would say, American opera as well. Do you guys talk at all about how this opera, this American opera, may have inspired or helped other composers with their American opera style and the things that they did? Because, I mean, you have someone like Gershwin who has this background of the Rhapsody in Blue, and then, of course, the background of American in Paris, and all this just lush, phenomenal music that I just watched every Saturday morning and Gene Kelly's probably why I married a white guy, but that's totally different story. Totally different story. Different story. Different story. Phenomenal, right? That speaks to the spirit of how that music works. Are there pieces out there that were inspired by this particular production of Porgy and Bess?
I am sure that there were. I am sure that there are. One of the things about great music is that in subtle ways it can inspire other people to take a strain, an element of thought from it and move forward. But it's certainly true that where this falls historically, as you've been speaking, there have been far more opportunities to consider an opera that presents the general themes of life through the lens of particular communities. And I think there's more and more of that, in not so much people who jumped on the Gershwin bandwagon, because Gershwin is Gershwin, and people lament the fact that he died so young and wonder what he would have done had he lived longer and what other operas he might have written, because I'm prepared to believe that he would have. But I think it just widens the horizon for thinking and for artistic expression.
Fantastic.
I would also add to that, I think, Gershwin called this a folk opera, right? A jazz opera. Because, like even just now, like when I sang Summertime, yes, I sing in an operatic style, but then sometimes I'll sort of like scoop or I'll use straight tone and slide and different ways of singing. And I'm sure it's the same in your portrayal. There is a bit more freedom because it does use other musical idioms than just sort of classical opera. And I think that's a beautiful and unique thing about Porgy and Bess. And, just in the past decade or so, we've been involved in productions, for example, by Terence Blanchard, who did Fire Shut Up in My Bones, Champion, which also utilizes different musical styles. There's a jazz band in the orchestra pit in those shows. And it's the same sort of thing where people can use different styles of vocalism, and it's not just sort of strict opera. And I think that is something that Gershwin, I think we should very much sort of applaud him for sort of opening that. It's that in-between spot that it could be, yes, on a Broadway stage, but you know what? It takes real opera voices, trained opera voices, to be able to sing that stuff, and it is equally at home on an opera stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, to add to that, we have to also remember that Gershwin was using leitmotifs, right, that really became popular during Wagner, where whenever you hear ba 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 da 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 dee, da da da, you're like, oh, here's this character, right? We associate that with a certain character. That's Porgy's music. But yeah, so this Sporting Life and the snaky sort of sound. So Gershwin was using those musical elements, and like you mentioned with Terence Blanchard, sort of carrying over this sort of jazzy opera, where's the line thing. But I think one of the cornerstones of Porgy and Bess is that it really helped to solidify this idiom of American opera. A set in America, about America, using Americans, using an American composer, with these themes that you find later on in operas like Susanna by Carlisle Floyd, which is very much an American opera. And there were many of operas written in English before then, but you find like William Grant Still, Highway 1, these are sort of American works. And I think Porgy and Bess really helps to give us sort of a dial, a point to say this is when people started to really take the idea of American opera serious.
Right, wonderful. And yeah, that term American opera is really what this is all about, right? And it is the classical tradition of the European opera format through compose, recitatives, arias, all of those things, large ensembles, but with that inflection of the jazz and the blues and the, phenomenal Fire Shut 'Em in My Bones. I shout out to Cincinnati Opera doing things where they're writing brand new pieces written by African American composers, Terrence Blanchard, of course, being one of them. I was actually going to debut one of the operas, Fierce, that was written, but COVID, that happened. Anyway, so somebody else debuted it because I was doing something else. But anyway, so it's just neat to see how this art form is thriving and alive, especially today, especially today. So I like to credit it to Porgy, though. I like to credit it to the fact that that was such a unique type of art form for its time. And like you said, it really did open the doors for the other composers to be able to express themselves and not be held to the restrictions of what European opera would be. So at this time, if you guys have any questions, we're going to take some questions from the audience. I think I'm supposed to get up with the mic.
Oh, no, they have a microphone.
They have a mic out there?
Microphone's coming on
wonderful.
either
Mic is
side.
coming, so if we have one standing there, we can take that. Oh, and yes, we've got another singer in the room. This is great.
Du Bois Haywood, sorry. He, as you were saying, created the concept, the overall book before it was changed, the libretto, some of the actual lyrics. My question is, how did compensation work for him for Porgy and Bess?
Right.
There was a fight.
Well,
for
there
the
was
rights.
certainly a contract.
Yeah, there was a contract, but I remember reading that they fought for compensation when it went to when it became a play, and then when it became a movie, DuBose and his wife sued Goldwyn, the Hollywood company, and they lost that one. And so it was very controversial.
Well, and it does also sort of give me the opportunity to say that one of the things we have in many of our special collections in the music division are business papers. There is the entire file of the Theater Guild materials that document the original production and the circumstances under which the original work was created. And it's not uncommon, I think, especially for something like Porgy and Bess, which didn't recoup its initial investment. So then the question is, who's willing to take a cut or a reduction in their share of it to move it forward, and under what circumstances? And we see the 1942 production by Cheryl Crawford that eliminated quite a lot of the recitative and substituted spoken dialogue, and some of those decisions are made in the interest of seeing how we can market it a little further.
And I do believe that the book Porgy was a commercial success. So he did do very well with that book. He wrote several books after that that were not as good. And he did not gain much notoriety from them. So Porgy was the main one. And it took almost 10 years from when Gershwin read that book before the opera came into existence. So I'm sure within that 10-year period of time, there was a lot of infighting about rights and who deserves what and things like that. But they finally worked it out. And I will also say that when so they worked it out. 10 years later, he's written this stuff. Everybody used to think the little story that Gershwin's will says that only black people can sing the roles in Porgy and Bess. And that is a misnomer. That's not true. What's really true is the Gershwin Foundation has made it a requirement for African Americans to sing the lead roles in Porgy and Bess. And I know all of that was tied up in some of the financial struggles with the opera. I don't really have all the details because I'll be here at the Library of Congress reading about it in the business papers before I speak on it. But so great question. I guess we can't really answer how the DuBose Foundation may have worked out from that, but definitely the Gershwin Foundation has.
Quick question. How did Todd Duncan, a Washingtonian, get the role of Porgy? And second question, is it true, what's his name? Al Jolson. That Al Jolson lobbied for the lead role at one time with George Gershwin?
You want this?
Nope.
Well, let's take the second question first. Yes, it is true that Al Jolson lobbied for this. George Gershwin said very clearly, and actually I thought sort of tactfully, that he did not believe that Mr. Jolson would be able to do the kind of performance that he had in mind. So, I mean, that, you know, you can dig down all you want, but bottom line, George Gershwin said he was not interested in Al Jolson portraying Porgy with everything that would have brought with it. And your other question was, how did George latch on to Todd Duncan?
Yes.
Well, I'm not actually sure how George found out about Todd Duncan, but he, and you may know the answer to this, but George became aware of this singer who lived in Washington, D.C., and contacted Duncan and said, I'm writing this opera and I'd love if you would come and sing for me. And Todd Duncan said, I'm sorry, I can't. I got a church choir program, and you know, it's sort of hard to imagine when you were speaking earlier about turning things down for one reason or another. But finally, George Gershwin convinced Todd Duncan to come to New York and sing for him. And the way I have heard the story is that he was convinced on a hearing, and he asked Duncan to sing art songs and serious music of one kind and another.
So I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me, he had done Showboat already. Because Todd Duncan was in Showboat. But don't quote me on that. But he did do Showboat. Anyway, I don't know if that's what made him aware of Todd Duncan. But at the time, he was a very popular African-American artist and like one of the foremost bass baritones around. So he'd be a natural selection for George Gershwin to pick for the role.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Todd Duncan because he was very much a high Verdi baritone as opposed to a bass baritone. And what makes it difficult if you sing the role of Porgy, thank you, Todd Duncan, is that Gershwin was writing the role for a general singer, right? So you have bum 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 ba da ba 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 ba, which is very easy in terms of melody and harmony and range, tessitura. Well, he gets Todd Duncan, who is such an amazing singer and a phenomenal musician, that he goes, oh, let me try some things out. Oh, Bess, oh, where's my Bess? It's like, what in the end? Todd Duncan came along about halfway through the process. So the first part of the opera, you're like, oh, well, this isn't so bad. And then as it goes on, it gets higher and harder and high. And you're like, thanks, Todd Duncan. Thank you for that. So, yeah, it's one of the difficulties of singing the role is you have to be warmed up at the top of the show but you can't be too warm because then you can't sing the bottom. But then you can't push the bottom because then all of a sudden at the end you're screaming at the So yeah, Todd Duncan was very much a high baritone.
Absolutely. Very much so, very much. So, of course, I would also want to give a shout out to our other Porgies along the way. We've had our William Warfield, the great Eric Owens, that's around now, Willard White, Morris Robinson. Some of you may know Morris because he's in this area a lot. And, of course, Reggie, everybody. Reggie, our little Porgy.
You mentioned Donnie Ray Albert.
I did not.
So, I'll just take over, I guess. No, so you mentioned great
Well, you are
Porgies.
Porgy.
One of them, Donnie Ray Albert, who was a part of the big Houston Grand Opera production that brought the opera back to prominence on the Grand Opera stage in '76. Donnie Ray did the role. I think he was actually 25 when he did the role. And what's amazing is that he did the role hundreds and hundreds of times everywhere, all over the world. And 50 years later, he's going to be in the production of Porgy and Bess at Houston Grand Opera this fall. So that's
Wow.
pretty, singing Lawyer Frazier of all things. And what's even more special for me with Donnie Ray Albert, the very first opera I saw was Tosca at the Atlanta Opera. And I knew African-American opera singers existed, you know, knew of Leontine Price and, you know, Jesse Norman and so, but you don't often hear about the male singers in opera. And here I was, 15 years old, and this man comes out, and I think, oh my God, who is this person? His voice just enveloped me as a young singer, and it made me go home and say, I want to learn everything about this person. I want to sing like that. I started taking voice lessons, and it's because of Donnie Ray Albert, one of the greatest Porgies, that I actually really started taking lessons. And I tell him all the time that I'm incredibly grateful for his career and his artistry that influenced the little kid in Atlanta to decide to be an opera singer.
Fantastic.
So yes, mention Donnie Ray.
I'm sorry I didn't mention Donnie. Sorry. Of course, I love mentioning Todd as well because in my youth as a singer, I had the honor to do a master class, and he was the master artist with Todd Duncan. He is the scariest man that ever lived on the planet Earth. Just kidding. Anyway, but of course you have the Leontine Prices, like you said, but the reason why this opera is so cool and American is because you can have somebody like Cap Calloway who sang Sporting Life. Yeah, so how cool. All right, we have about 4 minutes left, so that's enough time for a couple more questions, if we have any.
First, I want to thank you all for a fabulous evening of performance and enlightenment. Certainly whetted my appetite to see Porgy and Bess at the Kennedy Center, and my wife and I already have
May
our
23rd.
tickets. I wanted just to quickly pick up and ask a question on what Professor Walker Powell said about how long it took the Metropolitan Opera to put on Porgy and Bess. I'm originally from New York, and so I'm going to defend the Met a little bit, but maybe not completely. I was living in New York in 1985 when they finally put it on, and it had been eagerly anticipated. It was literally the hottest ticket in New York, and I managed to score a pair. It was so hot that, and I think I'm not being overly political or insulting when I say this, a very, very well-known New York real estate developer who is not known for caring much for opera was there the Saturday night that I saw it. What I remember at the time was that the Met management, so to get to my question, sorry, the Met management had wanted to stage Porgy and Bess for a long time, but the union representing the chorus said, no, 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 you can't do it without us. And of course, the chorus was mostly white. And it took a long time to finally resolve this, which I assume meant the chorus got paid off to step aside. But I'm wondering, did the Met really want to do this for a long time, or was it really not until maybe the 1980s that they got serious about it?
Well, I would say it was the 1980s when they got serious about it. It was, yes, there were the contractual disputes with the chorus and things like that, but honestly, it's something they could have resolved a lot earlier, just especially because of the fact that this opera was written for the reason why it was written, to have these people of color in roles. And the artistic director and executive director and the board of the Met at the time could have easily made the decision at any point. And I think it didn't happen until we got the right people in those places in order for it to happen. So.
And I would just like to say, you know, kudos to Washington National Opera,
Yes.
frankly, to Francesca Zambello for this amazing production that we're about to do, and Tim O'Leary, and for them for constantly pushing the envelope and always wanting there to be a diverse group represented on that Washington National Opera stage. I think it's a really wonderful thing, and I think in comparison to many of the major opera houses in this country, Washington is always presenting such fabulous repertoire, and you can see all different types of people on the stage, and representation is really important, just like you saw with Donnie Ray Albert. And you know, I remember being 15 and singing in the backup chorus to Jesse Norman, who was performing at the Kennedy Center Honors. And I was just, you know, she was an idol of mine, and I was just in awe. And she came out in her big caftan and the thing, and I was just like, oh my gosh. But I mean, it was so encouraging. It was a moment I said, I really want to be like her one day. So those moments happen, and here we are. So it's really important. So kudos to Washington National Opera. Oh.
Absolutely. And let's now welcome to the stage Marvin Mills, everyone.
As a lowly keyboard person, there's one little tidbit, and you started, and I was going to back off, but then you said some things. If you're familiar with the recording, the DVD and CD recording of Jesse Norman and Kathy Battles' Spiritual Concert, the choir for that is that Metropolitan Opera 1985 Porgy and Bess chorus. That's right. They are not credited. There is no credit in there. Just that tidbit.
Thank you for that tidbit.
Marvin Mills.
That's awesome.
One last one up there.
I think we have one last question at the top in the back. Yes.
Thank you so much. You all have amazing voices. This is a general question for the vocalists. How much room do you feel like this opera gives you for vocal artistic interpretation in your performance?
Well, I will say it's great because there are a lot of flexibilities within the music and within the rhythms and all. But I will be my best Devo self and say I make artistic spaces and interpretations no matter what it is, no matter where I am.
Amen to that.
You don't like it, don't hire me.
And, you know, along the lines of what you're saying about the role being vocally, you know, for different types of bass or bass baritones, you know, it's a very physically demanding role as well for Porgy, because of whether he's on a cart or on a crutch or whatever, there's that for the Porgy character. And for Bess, I mean, she's drunk sometimes, she's getting tossed around and abused sometimes, and the abuse scene is when she is having to sing her most difficult music. I mean, she's crawling on the floor, she's being thrown over Crown's shoulder, and it's singing B naturals, and it's a lot. And so, you know, for my preparation for a role like this is to 100% have it locked down technically way before I ever get into a staging rehearsal, so that once we have to do all that physical stuff, the technique is sort of, it's just there, and then you can feel the freedom to do all those dramatic and artistic things that the roles require.
Right, and because of the physicality, and this is why we have staging, right? There are times where a conductor might say, oh, okay, that needs to be a little slower, or this needs to be a little faster, or, you know, so we find it certainly in the rehearsal room. Yeah. And if you come to the theater between May 23rd and 31st, you will see what we've come up with.
Exactly. I love that. Well, again, I want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for being here today. I hope you all do come out May 23rd to the 31st to the Kennedy Center. And I do hear that there is an amazing exhibition that is in the lobby of the Kennedy Center where you exhibit of women, the women of Porgy. And so, of course, we got all of our great summer times. My man's gone now. Bet you all the great songs. But you can see a little bit about the history of that and particularly how it has affected the women in this particular opera. And I would like to end this by saying, I hope that you learned something wonderful about this opera that makes you think of it a little bit more than just, oh, here comes Porgy and Bess, but how important it is for our society today. I hope that you all do learn, and I hope that you all do leave knowing community matters. Community matters. Self-dignity matters. Abused women and what they go through in life and what they need to have to help them through to the next spot matters. Homeless populations that are in the street, see them. See them. Porgy and Bess should make you all do that when you leave that theater, as well as tap your toes and sing some tunes. So thank you, everybody, for coming out.